lived life to the fullest. Why not? The fate of that artist was filled with adventure, fame, and many lovers. He was both flamboyant and shy, outspoken and secretive.
I'm a big ham, really. I just get on that stage and do it.
Some people were repelled by his unusual appearance, while others, on the contrary, were attracted. And his talent will remain undeniable for centuries. Freddie Mercury. What kind of person was he? What childhood traumas affected his life? What album does he consider to be the best of his career? And why was he left almost alone at the end of his life? Welcome to the Biographer channel. Today, we have a lot of interesting things. Therefore, sit back and we're starting. Freddie Mercury, or Farrokh Bulsara, is a famous British singer and musician of Parsi origin. Later, he would take a pseudonym, but before that, years would pass before Farrokh, an undeniably talented young man, decided to change his life radically. The future artist was born on September 5, 1946 in the stone town of the island of Zanzibar. In those days, Zanzibar was a puppet state of the British Empire. His father, Bomi, was an accountant at the Supreme Court of England and Wales. His mother, Jur Bulsara, was a housewife and raised two children, Farrokh and his 6-year-old younger sister, Kashmira. Since Bomi Bulsara earned well, the family did not need anything. His real name translates as lucky, and his smile conquered even strict judges. One day, Farrokh's mother took a picture of the boy when he was only a year old and submitted it to a local photography contest. Young Farrokh won first place, melting the hearts of the jury. When the boy turned 7, he moved to Bombay to study at a boarding school. It was located 100 kilometers from the largest city in India. There were two reasons for that. Firstly, Farrokh's parents were from Bombay and moved to Zanzibar only because of the boy's father's job. Therefore, Bulsara's relatives remained in those parts, with whom the boy could later meet on weekends. Secondly, Farrokh's family belonged to the Parsi ethnic group, which preached Zoroastrianism. Their largest community was located in Bombay. Indian culture formed the basis of Farrokh's education and upbringing. Later, in all his interviews, he would idyllically recall that period of time. In his studies, Farrokh showed himself as a diligent and capable student. There are school letters to his parents which said about the high academic performance of their son. The craving for creativity manifested itself in the young man from childhood. He gave away his drawings, which it was said to be very good, to everyone around. In addition, Farrokh was seriously fond of tennis, hockey, and boxing. You can see the young man honorably and proudly on the top of a podium of prize winners of sports competitions in the family photos. And of course, there was music. In particular, there was the young man's craving for singing. Farrokh enrolled in the school choir and spent all his time there. The school principal noticed his love for singing. He advised his parents to take their son to study music at piano courses. He even promised to agree on an acceptable cost of education. So Freddie began to engage in music seriously. Despite his noticeable appearance and talent, the future musician was a shy child prodigy. One of the boy's classmates recalled, "He could play anything. He had the unique ability to listen to a song on the radio just once and be able to play it perfectly. He could sing anything, from rock and roll to classical music. For example, apart from the Hectics, he was also part of a Western classical music group at school where 3 boys would sing in 3 different keys. And that is probably one of the reasons for the eclectic sound he created for Queen in later years." Western pop music had a special influence on the boy, and therefore, in addition to the piano, the boy began to master the guitar by the age of 12, and he even created his first musical group, the Hectics, and got hooked on rock and roll. More precisely, another 12-year-old musician, Bruce Murray, created it, but Farrokh became the lead singer, guitarist, and star of the performance. The guys were inspired by Elvis Presley, Cliff and Little Richard, and the other popular musicians of the 50s such as Fats Domino, Ricky Nelson, and Fabian. His friend and one of the band members recalled that the guys decided to do that, mainly to attract girls, which eventually succeeded. The Hectics have become quite famous in Pankani. All school children of the city flocked to their concerts, and of course, there were girls. But the main reason for our success was Freddie. He was the only real musician among us, said Farhang Irani in his interview. They performed wherever they could, including all school events. 5 students dressed in tight trousers, thin string ties, pointy shoes, and brill-creamed hair with big puffs. According to the band members, Mercury as lead singer was what brought them their local fame. And even though the young man was not very good at reading music, he devoted all his free time to writing new songs.
Lessons when I was in boarding school. And of course, I didn't think at the time that I was going to make music my career. But I was always interested in music. I think I obviously had a musical streak, so I used to sing along.
For that period, the first change happened in Farhakh's life. He became Freddie. All due to the fact that it was difficult for his English-speaking classmates to pronounce his name. And with a high probability, another reason was the youthful fashion for everything Western. But life at school was not so easy. In a 1984 interview, he said, "Everything they say about boarding school is more or less true. There are hooliganism, fights, etc. My weird teacher molested me. It stays with you for your whole life." In addition, Freddie had a specificity. He was born with 4 extra teeth in the back of his mouth. That formed his famous smile. His dental feature gradually pushed his front teeth forward as he grew. Everything led to the fact that the young man was often laughed at and teased at school, giving him the nickname Bucky. But it was not only at school. The structure of the musician's jaw made him the object of ridicule throughout his life. He was shy because of it. He constantly covered his upper jaw with his hand, especially when smiling. And later, he grew a mustache. Farhang Irani recalled, "He was an introvert, but he could also be quite a clown when he wanted to, like Jerry Lewis, the famous comedian of those days. He was very much a loner. Happiest when he was playing the piano or in the art school." Mercury never corrected his malocution, even after he became a star. He believed the operation would affect his vocal range. But the life changes were not over. When the future star turned 16, Zanzibar gained its independence. After a bloody revolution, the young man's family was forced to move to the suburbs of London due to the problems with the local population. The Bulsara family, like all the local Indian residents of the Sultanate, were given 6 months to leave. In sunny Feltham in West Middlesex, they bought a small house with a terrace and settled down. That was why Farhakh Freddie had to get used to new realities. He was very different from his British peers. In addition, the young man experienced something like a culture shock. "I grew up in India where I saw poverty everywhere, but here you can only think about poverty." The short haircut was replaced by a mane, and the suit was replaced by torn jeans and frayed t-shirts. But the guy quickly assimilated and even began to enjoy his new hair. Despite his shyness, Farhakh had a special charisma, so he could easily win over people. And he quickly found new people with whom he hung out at nightclubs until the morning, which caused conflicts in the family. An equally acute situation was Farhakh's reluctance to go to college. Having become accustomed to independent decisions in his life, he categorically refused to receive a serious profession. Instead of the burden of an accountant or lawyer, the future star desperately wanted to be creative. So the compromise was the Department of Graphic Design at Ealing Art College. There, he became interested in the works of Jimi Hendrix and Rudolf Nureyev. He even devoted his dissertation to the first one. Already in college, the young man showed himself as an extraordinary person. For example, one day, he made something resembling clothes out of a tablecloth and came to class. "Many people think that I have a foul temper, but I like to be ambiguous and surround myself with complex, conflicted sons of bitches. In the company of impeccable people, I would be bored." And so, fate gave Freddie a legendary meeting with the same controversial person. During the last course of study, the young musician met David Bowie. He came to college for a concert, and Freddie helped with the musical equipment. He even put together dining tables to create an impromptu scene. That impressed David and marked the beginning of a long friendship. After graduation and conflicts with a neighbor over loud music, Freddie decided to rent a flat in London and live separately. Independent life had another side. He needed to provide for himself. During his studies, Freddie tried to make music professionally and even joined the blues group Ibex, which eventually became Wreckage. But the group quickly broke up and the young musician joined the Oxford group Sour Milk Sea. But it also did not work out. By the beginning of 1970, the group also broke up. Freddie's acquaintance with Tim Staffel was fateful. By that time, he was a student at Imperial College and the guitarist of the 1984 band, later renamed as The Smile. By chance, they became roommates and Tim introduced his unusual friend to other members of the musical trio, Brian May and Roger Taylor. They would later sell secondhand things together. After some time, Tim began to invite Freddie to rehearsals and gradually became a permanent member of the group's environment. The latter's success followed a very variable path. They recorded the single Earth, Step on Me for Mercury Records, which quickly disappeared after its release in the US in August of 1969 and a performance at London's Marquee Club in December of that year. And when, due to problems with his studies, Staffel left the group, May and Taylor, without hesitation, invited Freddie to take his place. The musicians were attracted to the exotic appearance of the young man and his love for unusual clothes. May and Taylor were equally impressed by the young man's sense of humor and charming mannerisms. May recalled, "Even back then, Freddie knew he would be a star. His pockets were empty and there was no sense of any success. There was not even a hope of success, but this did not stop him. He went his own way and remained himself." The group was renamed as Queen under the influence of the young talent. Some authors believe that it manifested the androgynous nature of the musician and the royal desire for success. Freddie sold old clothes and other goodies in London's Kensington Market along with his new friend Roger Taylor to earn for a living and for creativity. Among the items were paintings by Ealing students and even Freddie's dissertation. In addition, he had a period of work as a loader at Heathrow Airport. Taylor recalled, "Then I didn't know him as a singer yet. He was just my friend, my crazy buddy. If there was fun to be had, Freddie and I usually got involved." While working in the market, Freddie again met David Bowie, who was looking for a new pair of shoes. It was said that Mercury gave the musician a gift, giving him the shoes he liked from his counter, for which Bowie did not have enough money. As early as 1971, Queen was the opening act for Yes, and bassist John Deacon joined them the same year. And so the 20-year-old history of the legendary group began. A few months later, the four-piece group gave their first concert at the Cornish Red Cross Charitable Foundation on June 27, 1970. According to various sources, in 1969 or 1970, Freddie met the woman of his life, Mary Austin. Brian May introduced them. Mary worked as a manager in a cosmetics store. Freddie was still selling clothes. At first, the girl was pushed away by such an extravagant guy. Freddie was not like any of her friends, but getting to know him better, she fell under the spell of his influence and charisma. In one of the interviews, she would say that the young man was not like any person she had met before. "He was very confident and I have never been confident. We grew up together. I liked him, and it went on from there," she said. Since Queen did not yet bring enough money, the young people gathered in a small room in which they lived together for some time. But the showman's insiders didn't believe in their relationship. Mercury himself was attracted by no less eccentric personalities, but Mary was different. Writer Leslie Ann Jones, who toured with the band in the 1980s, wrote, "She was the opposite of Freddie. She never really said very much. They were like this old married couple, and they would spend a lot of time in bed, but Mercury would pull the piano to the bedside to write songs." Mercury played a leading role in creating the band's concept. He gave free rein to his natural eccentricity, inspired by Hendrix, Bowie, glam rock, Led Zeppelin, and progressives like the group Yes. The group decided on the style of music. The image of the musicians began to work out, but it would change later. Freddie at that time believed that everyone's nerves should be stretched to the limit, especially the vocalist. Using his design skills, Freddie designed the famous Queen crest, featuring the zodiac signs of all group members. A crab for May, lions for Deacon and Taylor, and a fairy under each lion for Mercury. The phoenix at the back guards the bandmates, and the Q in the center is the Queen symbol. He also owned the authorship of most of the compositions. Mercury wrote 10 of the 17 songs on Queen's Greatest Hits album. Bohemian Rhapsody, Seas of Rhye, Killer Queen, Somebody to Love, Good Old Fashioned Lover Boy, We Are the Champions, Bicycle Race, Don't Stop Me Now, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, and Play the Game. In 2003, Mercury would be posthumously inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame for his contributions along with the rest of the band. Talent and an abundance of works of their authorship did not immediately play into the hands of the young musicians. There was a problem in the recording studio, without which it was difficult to release the final product. Brian's friend, who worked at Delane Lea Studios, came to the rescue. The band was offered to barter. They had to test the equipment, perform in front of potential studio clients, and record some good singles to attract new faces. In exchange, Queen could use it for their purposes. Roger Taylor recalled that Freddie often visited his house in the early days after the formation of the group. Roger's mother was delighted with the impeccable appearance of the young man and the fact that his clothes were always perfectly ironed. But as it turned out, Mercury had his little trick for that. According to Roger, after he took them off, he would lay them dead straight underneath his mattress on the floor. He pressed them while he was sleeping. In 1972, Freddie added the alias Mercury to his assumed name. Sources said that after the group formation, Freddie wanted to change his last name to something worthy of a rock star. According to Michael May, Freddie chose his stage name from the Queen song My Fairy King, which he wrote in 1973. Its text contained the lines, "Mother Mercury, Mercury, look what they've done to me. I cannot run, I cannot hide." In 1973, he officially changed his name. Perseverance and work at night paid off. The group signed their first contract with the label Trident Studios. In the same year, the first Queen album was released, which included the classic compositions Keep Yourself Alive and Seas of Rhye, and instantly became popular, and Queen brought its debut tour around the country. Freddie explained the album release by the fact that the musicians were meticulous about the famous ones and carefully chose a label for cooperation. "We've had great offers coming in, but we were careful not to fall for it. We considered all labels before making the final choice. We didn't want them to treat us like an ordinary group." The first concerts of Queen made a splash among the British public. Freddie's unusual vocals and his eccentric behavior on stage caused both humiliation and delight. The desire of the musicians to mix styles and a peculiar presentation of familiar rock, including elements of both heavy metal and glam rock, were traced in the first songs. During the work on the first album, Freddie took part in the Trident Studios project, where under the pseudonym Larry Lyrics, he performed cover versions of the songs I Can Hear Music and Going Back. But the project was quickly closed as it did not bring success. The guys decided not to waste time and quickly released their second album, Queen 2, in 1974, which they recorded in just 1 month. The album was a manifestation of the growth of the musicians and the search for their sound. There, you could hear signature harmonies and an unusual musical style, including ballads, folk, blues, metal, pop, and rock. The album brought the first tour of America. In addition, the visual image of the group also emerged, so it was decided to make one side of the album black and the other white. They collaborated with Mick Rock to do it, who is famous for his collaborations with David Bowie and Pink Floyd. The black side of the album was inspired by the photographs of Marlene Dietrich, and 4 heads tightly pressed against each other on a black background graced the album. It also became one of the most famous images of the group, known as singing heads. We would see them in Bohemian Rhapsody, filmed 2 years later. However, Queen's real popularity came with their third album, Sheer Heart Attack, also released in 1974. It was there that the first hit of the group, Killer Queen, sounded, which told about an elite girl of low moral character. It is noteworthy that unlike most of his songs, Mercury wrote the lyrics for that song before the music. The single peaked at number 2 on the UK charts and peaked at number 12 in the US. In addition to musical talent, Freddie clearly had artistry and an understanding of how to use it. He understood how to attract and establish contact with the public. In part, it explains the group's popularity. They continued to appear before the audience provocatively in costumes, often in tight spandex and ballet shoes, with a big pile of hair. They like to produce crazy and eccentric shows that maximally overturn the idea of performances.
I personally just have a good time just fooling around on stage, you know. And that's why I'm not afraid to sort of fall flat on my face, because I mean, you know, coming up with some of the things I wear, sort of over the top. I mean, they have an element of humor which I hope comes across. That's basically what it is now. And if I'm seen to be having fun on stage, I think it kind of comes across.
The NME journalist in the same year wrote about Mercury. Freddie Mercury is a completely normal guy. You know how fed up he is with all this talk about how Queen will someday be great? He already considers himself a star, trying on the image of a celebrity, like well-tailored pants. Another feature of the singer's performance was the bottomless microphone, which appeared by accident. During one of the performances, his stand broke, but Freddie did not lose his head and continued to sing. He apparently liked the effect so much that he performed that way every time. The group developed. A peculiar mix of hard rock and glam rock brought Queen even greater success in 1975 with their fourth album, A Night at the Opera. Having tried all sorts of styles and music before, they finally reached their unique sound. It included the famous 7-minute rock operetta Bohemian Rhapsody. Freddie was able to demonstrate his natural talent by performing it in 4 octaves. It was one of the entire list of compositions of the group, which was written mainly by Mercury himself. The uniqueness of the work also lay in the fact that it was created, in fact, from 6 different parts. The video clip was filmed with an overlay of faces and shots, which was rare at that time.
I mean, in fact, I love the challenge. I sort of, you know, I love the challenge, and I like doing things that are not part of the mainstream for me. And sometimes if that works, it works in a very big way. Otherwise it can be a very big flop, but I'm willing to take that risk.
Before officially including the song to the album, Freddie decided to ask his friend, the famous radio DJ Kenny Everett, for his opinion. The DJ doubted that a track longer than 6 minutes would not have success, but still listened to it. After listening, Everett exclaimed, "Forget it, it will be #1 for ages." And so, it happened. But Freddie's character manifested even in that situation. When all the radio stations refused to broadcast the work because it was too long, he did not agree to shorten it. Before the album's release, Freddie felt that they had created something unique and realized that he came out too eccentric. He enjoyed it. We allow ourselves a little extra on every album, but that's what Queen is all about. At a certain point, we understand that we want to go beyond what is permitted. The song won first place in the UK charts and reached the top 10 in the US. And in 2002, it was included in the Guinness Book of World Records as the best song in history. The band started making money after the release of the 4th album. Before that, they spent all their money on legal costs and the termination of various unnecessary contracts. One of the band's best memories of the 1975 tour was their performance in Japan. Brian May recalled, "We've had some success in England and the US, but we've never seen such fanaticism and adoration. Suddenly in Japan, we began to feel like real stars, like the Beatles and Bay City Rollers. People greeted us with shouts of delight, which was news to us." After those tours, Freddie began to get involved in Japanese culture and painting. Queen's popularity continued to rise in the late 70s and early 80s with the following albums: A Day at the Races in 1976, News of the World in 1978, and The Game in 1980. A Day at the Races was a continuation of the previous one, but critics defeated it for that. It was the first album produced by themselves, but that did not prevent it from taking first positions in the ratings of Great Britain, Holland, and Japan. The listeners especially appreciated the hits We Are the Champions, Don't Stop Me Now, and We Will Rock You. But it could not overshadow the previous success. Later, We Are the Champions and We Will Rock You became signature songs and were performed at the end of each concert. On October 7, 1979, Freddie's old dream came true. He performed at a charity event with the Royal Ballet. It was so important to him that he accepted a cameo role singing only 2 songs, Bohemian Rhapsody and Crazy Little Thing Called Love, in front of 2,500 people. But fame was starting to burden the musician more and more. Unflattering and revealing articles about the band and Mercury himself appeared in the press. There was no less attention to the details of his personal life. In his rare interviews, there was no revelation of psychoanalysis, but only touching sadness. There was the first problem in the reputation of Queen, connecting with their success and Freddie himself. Hot temper and changeability began to play against the image of a bohemian personality.
It's the media basically built me up being a real ogre and a tyrant on stage, because the way I come across on stage, I'm very volatile, and that's the only part they see of me. I mean, if I don't talk to everybody, so they don't really know the real me. And I don't think anybody will. And
how does it show itself?
I have tantrums. I mean, if something's not going right, I throw things. I mean, I could destroy a room in about 3 seconds. I used to be able to, but I don't do that anymore.
More and more passion began to look like a business. We became businessmen, contrary to our best aspirations, but it always accompanies success, said the artist. In addition to his main work, he began producing Peter Straker, opened a car company, and took on other projects. I live a busy life. My job brings me a lot of joy, but it's still my job, and I take it very seriously. And when you are tense and very serious, then outwardly, you give the impression of a heavy, quarrelsome person. Freddie explained the situation. There were also cardinal changes in the personal life of the musician. Mary and Freddie lived together for 7 long years, very close, and even called themselves husband and wife. But there was always a feeling that something was missing in their relationship. In 1973, he proposed to the girl. When I was 23, he gave me a big box on Christmas Day. Inside was another box, then another, and so it went on. It was like one of his playful games. Eventually, I found a lovely jade ring inside the last small box. Mary was so stunned that she asked which finger to put it on. And in the end, she said yes. But it got worse. It didn't go well at home. After 6 years of relationship, there was no longer a question of marriage. I told him, "Something is going on and I just feel like a noose around your neck," she recalled in her interviews. When Mary asked about marriage and a child, the showman refused. How bad would I be as a father? Their quarrel ended with his apologies and explanations. Freddie confessed to the girl that he was bisexual. It was a turning point in the singer's personal life. Although Mercury never officially declared his orientation, the opportunity not to deceive himself and his beloved untied his hands, and Mary finally calmed down. She was able to understand what was really happening. "I'll never forget that moment," she recalled. Although I do remember saying to him at the time, "No, Freddie, I don't think you are bisexual, I think you are gay." The couple remained close friends until the singer's death. He bought her a flat nearby, but she spent most of her time at his Garden Lodge mansion. Mary was part of the family for Freddie. He bequeathed most of his $28 million fortune and Georgian dream home in Kensington to her. Freddie liked the idea that Mary would live there with her children since he was the godfather of Mary's eldest son. All my lovers asked me why they couldn't replace Mary, but it's simply impossible. The only friend I've got is Mary, and I don't want anybody else. To me, she was my common-law wife. To me, it was a marriage. We believed in each other, and that's enough for me. Mary has always been sure that Freddie was gay, although it would be objectively wrong to call Freddie a homosexual since there was both men and women with whom he had relationships. At the same time, Freddie's craving for an active sexual life was manifested even during his relationship with Austin. These included record executive Paul Prenter, David Mims, chef Joe Finelli, DHL courier Tony Bastian, and German restaurateur Winfried Winnie Kirchberger. Yet Mercury didn't entirely give up on women. In the 1980s, his female paramours included German actress Barbara Valentine. Freddie was not limited to serious relationships. Often while touring, he made one-night stands.
Go around the world and live in hotels, and that can be very lonely. But then I look upon it and I don't want people to say, I just say that's my life, and it can be a very lonely, it can be a very lonely life, but I chose it.
But over time, he shifted towards men. Cities like New York and Munich had gay scenes where Mercury, who'd called his sex drive enormous and who'd sung about being a sex machine ready to reload, found one-night stands and more. In 2017, May told the Sunday Times, It was fairly obvious when the visitors to Freddie's dressing room started to change from hot chicks to hot men. Why didn't Freddie openly tell that he was gay? The situation was likely banal. At that time, the public recognition of homosexuality could end his career and his colleagues' careers. For someone who wanted to stay popular, to get his music heard, and who didn't want to drive away fans, being open about his sexuality was something to avoid. At the same time, there was a theory that Mercury's Bohemian Rhapsody was sort of a coming-out party. In this interpretation, words such as "Mama just killed a man" may refer to Mercury's end to his heterosexual self. But of course, the singer himself never confirmed that information. Sexual appetite and love for luxury pushed him to wild and elaborate parties. For one of his birthdays, he brought a group of friends to the island of Ibiza. They marked the trip with fireworks and flamenco dancing. And that kind of life dragged on him more and more. His love of luxurious living was manifested, among other things, in collecting works of art. The artist once spent over $400,000 on hand-painted porcelain. Freddie decorated the living rooms and spacious foyer of his chic home with fine Japanese and Chinese furniture and artwork, oil paintings, and Dresden porcelain collected by himself.
Are you very, very rich?
Oh, I'm extremely rich.
Do you like being rich?
Of course.
What do you do with your
I
money?
flaunt it.
What do you do with your money?
I spend it.
He considered himself a man who was not born to save money. "I spend them," he said. "It's so exciting." One day, he called the Cartier store and asked for it to be opened specifically for him. He walked on it and felt like Zsa Zsa Gabor. Mercury liked to give generous gifts. Roger Cook, Freddie's brother-in-law, told how the artist spent thousands of pounds to renovate the kitchen for his sister Kashmira. He considered the process of giving something exciting. Austin recalled, "I think Freddie reached a stage where he thought he was invincible. He convinced himself he was having a good time, and maybe in part he was. But I think in part he wasn't. I think he stopped being honest with himself. Many of his so-called friends were there for the free tickets, the free booze, the free drugs, the free meals, the gossip, and of course, the expensive gifts." In the early 80s, the band changed its musical style and frontman's appearance. Mercury had his hair cut, refused bodysuits, and had the famous mustache. Queen became an international phenomenon, garnering special attention for its artfully choreographed performances in huge venues. Queen went on a world tour with the released album The Game. During it, they had 70 concerts. By the way, Freddie would consider the album the best for the entire period of the band's existence. Friends and colleagues of the singer knew how difficult it was for Freddie at such moments. He was always saying, "Guys, I don't want to tour anymore. I don't enjoy it." But we never believed him because we knew there was this whole other side of his character, Taylor recalled. In 1983, the band took a break from the tour and announced a short vacation. That was due to several factors. Unsightly articles about the musicians began to appear in the press and embittered the band members. And there was also attempts of the band members to create a solo career. Probably the musicians were just tired of public pressure and each other. And Mercury was not an exception. He believed the group was rolling down an inclined plane and they were all captured by a routine that had no end.
There was a time where we were doing tours so extensively, because we would go into a studio, make an album, and then tour the world, and then we'd go back, and that was the routine. I didn't have any time to actually break away, and we virtually did that for about 8 or 9 years, and that's why the last couple of years we wanted to break away from that format, because I was getting very bored, and so were the others, and just to get away and do different things and think about certain things.
The tension was exasperated by the fact that each quartet member could write hits and each yearned for self-expression, and Freddie knew it. He said that each team member wants to be a person in his own right, but the created image which he called the four-headed Hydra was difficult to destroy. However, they were all still strongly connected.
4 of us sort of write very different songs, and so it's kind of, it keeps us going. I mean, if everybody wrote the same kind of thing and we all appeal to the same kind of people and everything, then it would be a bit boring. I mean, we just have 4 totally diverse personalities and different egos, and then that runs riot, and that's good. So we still fight, and we still fight like kids.
Mercury's solo career helped him to show his individuality outside the group. In early of 1983, Mercury began working with Musicland Studios in Munich. Together with composer Giorgio Moroder, he was involved in an interesting project. It was the creation of modern music for the remastered version of Fritz Lang's film Metropolis. The result was the song Love Kills, released on September 10, 1984. In 1981 through 1983, Freddie recorded several songs with Michael Jackson. State of Shock, There Must Be More to Life Than This, and Victory in his home studio. However, only one of the tracks, State of Shock, was released in 1984 as part of Jackson's new album. The reason was a mystery. Perhaps there was the general dissatisfaction of the musicians with each other. Mercury did not like that Jackson brought his llama to the studio, and Jackson complained because Mercury was using drugs. In 1985, the first single of his solo album, I Was Born to Love You, was released. The album itself, titled Mr. Bad Guy, was released 3 weeks later, and 2 tracks from it, Made in Heaven and I Was Born to Love You, were subsequently re-recorded by Queen for their joint album Made in Heaven in 1995.
But now I think the time has come where I want a whole album of my own, and Roger's done 2 already, so I think most people thought that I would be the first one to have a solo album, and then the band, Queen would break up and all that, but here you are. After 13 years, 4 old ladies are still rocking away.
We may be a little surprised by this fact, but the album Mr. Bad Guy was dedicated to the artist's cats. To my cat Jerry, as well as Tom, Oscar, and Tiffany, and all cat lovers in the entire universe, to hell with everyone else, he wrote. Freddie was so obsessed with the tailed creatures that he called them during his trips to talk to them. Taylor claimed that Freddie did not want to pursue a solo career too much and did it only for money. He missed us a little. He called me and I had to fly to Munich to record his backing vocals, he recalled. But talent is talent. Mr. Bad Guy debuted in the top 10 in the UK charts and remained on the charts for 23 weeks. By the mid-1980s, Queen's commercial fortunes began to decline. But in that period, there was a huge event which was rightfully considered the culmination of the group's existence. On July 13, 1985, the Live Aid concert took place. 75,000 spectators and many famous performers such as Elton John, Paul McCartney, David Bowie, Black Sabbath, Sting, U2, and many more were present at the grand show at Wembley Stadium. Queen was the only band that had the smarts to cram all their hits into one performance. It was 17 minutes of success and transformation. The concert was aimed at raising funds for the victims of famine in Ethiopia and was a huge success. It was broadcast on television worldwide. Freddie said that he does not do it out of guilt, but out of the sense of pride. I am proud that I was asked to participate and that I can do something in this area. According to legend, the invitation to Live Aid sounded, "Tell this old faggot that this is going to be one of the greatest shows." Freddie was delighted. How can you not agree to such an offer? The band's performance was highly praised as one of the best. Mercury, who was dressed in a tank top and jeans, turned the crowd on with great energy. He had thousands of music fans at London's Wembley Stadium chant "We Will Rock You." Inspired by the event, the group wrote the hit One Vision. After the show, the group experienced a real Indian summer. Their performances filled stadiums. Albums with the best hits sold millions of copies. In the same year, Freddie met a man with whom he would have a relationship until his death. It was hairdresser Jim Hutton. They met in one of the gay nightclubs in London and dated for 6 years. We were both wearing a tight white vest and ice blue jeans. Then he said, "How big is your cock?" Freddie often used the last phrase for the acquaintance. In his interviews, Hutton claimed that he did not know who Mercury was on their first night, but only learned from the musician's chef. "My preference was for meatier men. From the waist down, Freddie was a swizzle stick, but there was something about him," he said. Mercury thought differently and persistently offered Jim a relationship. "He pursued me," he claimed. The world of Mercury captivated Hutton with its novelty and extravagance.
That's what my love is. I think my love is dangerous.
As a result, in 1986, Jim moved in with Freddie at Garden Lodge. At the same time, the artist continued relations with other men for some time. and he continued to use cocaine, although not so much according to the recollections of his boyfriend. In addition, Jim quit his job and took a job as a gardener for Mercury for £600 a month. Freddie tried his best to separate these three parts of his life: work, Hutton, and family. For that reason, his family saw Jim as their son's gardener. He might have worried about how coming out would have affected him professionally, but he didn't say that. We both thought our relationship and being gay was our business. The lover would look after the frontman in the last days of his life, and later he would release a book of memoirs about their relationship called Mercury and Me. On July 12, 1986, Queen again performed at Wembley as part of the Magic Tour in support of A Kind of Magic album. Over 120,000 people attended the concert. Despite declining health, Freddie still entertained the crowd. Having performed all his hits, Freddie, as usual, went out to the public in a robe holding a crown in his hands. On August 9th, the final tour show at Knebworth was Queen's last performance with Mercury. But at that time, other group members did not know about that. Mercury complained more and more about his health, but no one knew what was happening. During that period, the artist moved away from people and wanted more privacy. At the end of his life, he surrounded himself with a small, close-knit group of friends whom he felt he could trust. It was unknown whether it was due to a premonition of impending disaster, but Freddie reduced his circle as much as possible to the point that he fired almost all the servants. There was one visiting housekeeper, Austin, who periodically visited him and Hutton. Casual sexual relations also ceased. In an interview, he explained that by the desire for solitude, space, and the creative realization of his excitement. Sex was fun for me, but I'm done with it. Practicality has won in me, and I do not miss my old life. The first suspicions that the singer was sick appeared already in 1986. The press got the information that Freddie allegedly took an HIV test, but so far, no one knew about the possible illness of the star. And officially, he did not confirm the suspicions until the last days of his life and continued to work hard, especially solo. Freddie recorded 2 songs for the 1986 musical Time, the eponymous Time and In My Defense. And in December of 1987, he released the track The Great Pretender, which was a cover version of a song by the Platters. In March of the same year, Freddie met Montserrat Caballé in Barcelona and gave her a cassette with some of his songs. It impressed the famous opera singer so much that Caballé performed one of them at a concert in London, and in early April they worked together on an album. Already in May, Montserrat and Freddie performed Barcelona at the music festival, which took place on the island of Ibiza in the famous Q Club. On October 8, 1988, at the La Nit Festival in Barcelona, the second performance of Mercury and Caballé took place. They performed 3 songs: Golden Boy, How Can I Go On, and Barcelona.
Start the celebrations and cry.
It was Freddie's last performance. By that time, he was already seriously ill with AIDS. But despite his condition, he continued to write songs, and he managed to make drafts for 3 more albums of the group. So the albums, The Miracle and Innuendo, were released during Mercury's lifetime in 1989 and 1991. Before his death, Mercury worked in the studio with Queen. Those works were released in 1995 on Made in Heaven, the band's last album, which already used recordings of the singer's voice. Moreover, the frontman actively participated in the filming of video clips for some songs of the first 2 albums. Unfortunately, the clips for the album Innuendo were filmed in black and white to hide his condition. But we can see an emaciated, thin body and a pale face. There were no traditional tours in support of new records, and Queen made excuses they decided to deviate from the usual format. The famous singer died on November 24, 1991. A month before his death, he managed to record the legendary The Show Must Go On, which became his farewell to this world. In the last years of his life, Mercury was remembered as tortured, rarely seen in public, lying in luxury among cats and jewelry. The year after the artist's death, Queen gave a charity concert in memory of Freddie Mercury, and the raised money, over $20 million, was sent to the fight against AIDS. Even decades later, the famous artist is considered the greatest frontman ever. And frankly, the band never got close to their former greatness without Freddie. His image was immortalized on British postage stamps. Statues and memorial plaques were created in his honor. his magnetism still gathers fans from different parts of the earth. Mike Moran wrote about him. "We should remember him as one of the most iconic performers of the 20th century. He is a great man and wrote great songs. He's just unique. I don't know how his epitaph should sound, but from my point of view, he was a creative person. His sense of humor, performance style, compositions, ambition, and courage, he was all truly original." We know that some of you would like to know even more details and facts about the illness and death of the great artist. We wanted to reveal this difficult period of Freddie's life as much as possible for you, so we decided to dedicate a separate video. To watch it, click on the icon on your screen. How did the legendary showman spend the last months of his life? Who did infect Mercury with a deadly disease? And what was the scenario of the funeral written by him? Click on the link and find out all the details. And as always, it was Biographer. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and see you very soon.
The most important thing to me is to be happy, to be honest, to have fun.